This is Robert Reagan about to read Positively Yours. Before I get to that, though, I'm the rhymecologist. Why these pussies see the gynecologist. I melted snow. He shouldn't even want to rhyme because of this. I just had to say that. That beef bullshit's over with. Never was no beef. Just another one of my little publicity stunts. Big shout out to Snipe, Big Ren, Formula, and Bryce Snow. All of them. Never any problems there. Just me trying to get attention. Anyway, I got this new story called Positively Yours. Mike's mom was a terrible parent. First she got knocked up tricking at a truck stop. Then smoked a pack a day with whatever beer or wine she was drinking. Some said Mike would be born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Mostly everyone said his mom would have a miscarriage. Even in the womb, Mike was a survivor. Born the day after a huge winter storm, ice covered the roads as paramedics rushed his mom to the hospital. Hours later, she gave birth to that 9-pound baby boy. As soon as she got home, though, it was time to get back out there and resume her life. It didn't matter if she was a horrible mother because she had the best mom in the world. And it was Grandma that raised Mike. She did the best she could for her own daughter and tried to teach her to grow up with morals. It wasn't meant to be, so she failed, but with her grandson this worked and she raised a fine young man with respect who carried himself in a way that made others respect him. Of course there were times growing up when he could have went either way once girls and drugs came into the picture. First there was one evil baby mama, then another. This led to Mike's dreams ending. See, he was pretty good with the pen writing rap songs with his friends when they weren't involved in some real-life madness. Mike drank and smoked bud, but he was careful to stay away from their criminal schemes. His part-time job supported his habits and more importantly helped out his grandma since her check was cut after this Obama situation. Rapping was a lot of fun, but with it came haters trying to ruin and destroy their success to build on their own. His boys always fired back, but Mike kept his pens quiet when it came to beef. It was fine, but then a psychotic rapper who Mike had never heard of from the sticks blasted him on a YouTube video. They shared a mutual friend, and betraying Mike, this friend gave this venomous writer all the dirt he needed. See, this rapper also wanted to be a novelist. Dead broke and drug addicted, this guy had a kid but spent his every waking moment writing short stories and raps. Everyone hated him and they hated what he wrote even more. So this guy getting older felt like he had nothing to lose. It wasn't a video like Mike and his boys made with the hot cars and even hotter chicks. No, this guy made a bootleg video and read his rhymes from paper, not even riding a beat. He attacked Mike about never knowing his dad and his mom being an alcoholic who was never there. Being extremely disrespectful, this guy said Mike's grandma gave him head. Aside from that, he dissed Mike's boys and a young lady he had been seeing. All his friends clowned on him about it. They said there was no taking the high road on this one. What, son, you gonna let this dude go at your grandma like that? And your girlfriend? What they really wanted Mike to do was show his loyalty to their clique and get this guy for going at them. Mike wanted to knock him out for what he said about his grandma. Instead, he took it for what it was, a dummy doing anything to try to get attention. This idiot tried his best to push this, trying to make sure this video got out to everyone that knew Mike. This old friend who dished out the dirt also helped with this, tagging Mike on the video. When it came time to rebuttal or shut up, Mike felt sorry for this guy and gave his video props, even wished him luck before saying he would not diss him back. Negativity just wasn't his thing. Reading the comment, this starving artist was more devastated than if Mike lyrically destroyed even the thought of him. By taking the high road, he shut down this clown's scheme, killing him worse than a verse ever would. Of course, Mike's boys kicked him out of the group. They would have failed for that scheme. Mike was white, but he knew about the origins of hip-hop. It wasn't all about the controversy, it was about bringing people together. When Mike wanted when Mike wanted to murder with his pen, he always thought back to Nas's song "Carry On Tradition." This guy, so free with his hating pen, contacted Mike explaining that it was a publicity stunt, saying he was sorry for that rhyme about his family. Mike, being a forgiving soul as well as just an all-around good guy, invited this writer to the studio and showed him how to ride beats. Soon they collaborated on a song and Mike shouted out his name. Better than that, he even helped edit a few of this guy's badly written stories. Not long after that, his girl got pregnant. The first thing Mike did was give up his little hobby and then drugs and alcohol altogether. Next, he gave up his part-time job when they refused to make it full-time. He went out and applied everywhere, and after being constantly turned away, he finally got a good job. From there, he got his own place. This made him feel guilty leaving his grandma alone with her health starting to fail. She told Mike to go ahead. She said, "I'll be fine." And so he left knowing she wasn't really doing fine. Mike knew she wanted him to go on with the rest of his life without worrying about her. His girl, an auburn-haired demon, picked this time to start acting crazy, flipping out on him over everything, saying, "You let this guy disrespect me and you didn't diss him back, you made friends with him." At the time, she was cool with it. Mike said, "That's all you got on me?" He said, "Guess I'm not that bad of a guy after all." They just weren't meant to be, and it wasn't long before she split, still pregnant with his baby. Mike's child was the birth control that kept all the losers she was sleeping with from getting her pregnant. The Bible says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Mike rapped, but never claimed to slang rocks. After his girl left, he did a whole lot of sinning. The worst was having sex with a barely legal teenage drama queen. Things got worse. Things got even worse than that when she too got pregnant during their one-night stand. He regretted her but swore to never regret their child. He was going to be the father he never had. Mike was now going to be a father of two. He worked harder, and at the end of the day, he went home to no one. He was lonely inside and lost. Sometimes he would start to question God. During those times, he'd go sit by his grandma's side. She was suddenly always sick and spent most of her time in bed. His grandma, however, never felt too bad to give him words of wisdom and encouragement. "Be strong," she'd say. "God hasn't forgot about you." He'd ask her, "What about Mom? Did God forget about her?" His grandma answered him saying, "No, he didn't, but she forgot about him." Mike was there and cried when each of his children were born. Neither of them lived with him, but he seen them every chance he got, taking them both to his grandma's so she could see her great-grandbabies. They had so much fun with his kids. Around this time, during one of his free nights, Mike went and hung out at a bar. He had 2 beers and stopped. He didn't want to become his mother. With no one talking to him, Mike got up and walked out. In tight jeans, he seen a pretty brunette pushing this guy away, trying to follow her. Listening to their argument, Mike knows they're both drunk. He was just about to get in his car when he heard this guy slap this dark-haired young woman. Wasting no time, Mike ran and pushed this guy down. With tears filling her eyes, this intoxicated beauty asked Mike if she could leave with him, claiming she had nowhere to go. Slurring as she talked on the way back to his place, she told him her name was Dee. The guy who slapped her, Dee had met a week or 2 before. He sat around, drank beer, and played video games. Dee didn't want him, and he just couldn't accept it. She passed out in the car after telling the story. Mike carried her inside and tucked her in once he got home. Evil thoughts made him want to take advantage of Dee, but he resisted the temptation by sleeping on the couch. Waking back up in her right mind, she went in the other room and asked Mike if anything happened. He told her no, and something made her believe him. Dee thought Mike was handsome. Talking to him, she loved everything about Mike. His honesty and compassion made him unlike any guy she'd ever met. They agreed to keep seeing each other, and then they were one. Dee couldn't have kids of her own, but treated his son and daughter like they were hers. Everything was too good to be true. Dee, just like his daughter's mother, started acting crazy. Her excuse was, "I'm not sure I'm ready for a guy with kids." "Come on, Dee," he said. "You act like they're here all the time." Dee really loved Mike's kids. She just needed a reason to start pushing him away. Deep inside, she didn't feel worthy of his love. Dee was paranoid that he would leave her. So instead, she left him. This hurt worse than when his first baby mama left. Something about Dee made him think that they'd last forever. Mike was losing it, and then 3 weeks later, his grandma's next-door neighbor called and told him that she had died in her sleep the night before. Feeling weak, Mike had to sit down. He tried to hide it, but his broken heart unleashed his river of tears. His whole life, he'd never been closer to anyone else, and now she was gone. His kids were still young and probably wouldn't remember her. At the funeral, Mike stood in his all-black suit, wearing dark sunglasses to hide his sad eyes. The last person he expected to see was Dee. They hadn't spoke once since she left, but there she was with her hair pulled back and wearing a long black dress. She approached Mike as he stood looking down at his grandma's casket deep in the ground. "I'm sorry I left," she said, "but I had to come in here and be with you today." Dee read about it in the paper. Standing there, he refused to speak, and then she snatched his sunglasses off his face. "Mike, look at me," she said. "Please talk to me." He stared into her eyes for just a moment, then walked away, still without saying a word. Dee's own deep eyes, filled with sadness, watched Mike fade further into the distance until he was gone. A couple of months passed before they ran into each other again. Mike was dirty in faded jeans and a t-shirt. Dee looked pretty in a yellow sundress with her hair piled up on top of her head. Standing in a long line at the gas station, she wanted so bad for Mike to just speak to her. He'd gotten over his anger and hurt, knowing his grandma was happy up there in heaven. Mike still couldn't talk to her, not after the way he acted at the funeral. Unable to hold back, she ended up talking to him outside the store. Dee told him she was seeing that guy from the bar again. Unfortunately, she wasn't lying. Mike right away did everything he could to talk her out of this. Nothing he said worked, and this time it was Dee who was the one that walked away. She was just about to get into her car when he gave it one last shot, yelling out, "I love you, Dee," loud enough for everyone in the crowded parking lot. Yelling out, "I love you, Dee," loud enough for everyone in the crowded parking lot to hear. Her eyes teared up, her lips quivered. Then she ran as fast as she could back into his arms. They kissed long and hard. Pulling away, Dee says, "You know I don't love this guy." She says, "But are you sure you don't want anyone else?" Leaning in close, he kisses her again. "I'm all yours," he says. With a look of worry, she checks his expression. "Are you sure?" she says. Kissing her one more time, Mike says, "I'm positive." And he was, because there was still something about Dee that made him think their love would last forever. Okay, I love that story. It's called Positively Yours, and it would have been a whole lot better if I hadn't fucked it up like 20 million times. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Robert Reagan.